Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The blade trembled against the pulse of his throat, the cold steel a stark contrast to the feverish heat radiating from the man pinned beneath me. "Do it," the demon lord whispered, his voice a ragged velvet slide that sent shivers violently down my spine. His eyes, pools of molten gold usually filled with tyrannical boredom, were now wide, manic, and fixated on my face. He didn't look afraid. He looked starving. He reached up, his gloved hand wrapping around my wrist, not to stop the knife, but to guide it deeper into his own skin. A bead of dark blood welled up. If you have the nerve to wear his face, little tribute, then you should have the resolve to finish what he started. Kill me. Or are you just another empty vessel meant to torture a madman? To understand how I ended up straddling the most dangerous entity in existence, a knife pressed to his jugular, you have to understand that I wasn't always this fragile, porcelain-skinned youth named Julian. 3 years ago, I was Selim, the Grand Marshal of the Solar Empire. I was the sword of the light, the unyielding wall against the encroaching darkness. And my enemy, the man I had hunted across the scorched wastelands of the north, was Malachur. We were rivals written in the stars, two sides of a cosmic coin. Our battles were legendary, cataclysmic events that reshaped maps. And in the end, I lost. It wasn't a glorious duel. It was a betrayal by my own king, a knife in the back while I parried Malachur's shadow spear. I remember falling. I remember the look on Malachur's face, not triumph, but a sudden, shattering horror. He had reached out for me as the darkness took my vision. I expected the void. Instead, I woke up 3 years later in the body of Julian, a sickly, illegitimate son of a minor noble house that had just surrendered to Malachur's expanding empire. The irony was suffocating. I had died fighting the demon lord, only to be reborn as part of the tribute meant to appease him. The carriage ride to the Obsidian Citadel was a funeral procession. The other tributes, beautiful men and women weeping softly, knew their fate. Malachur, now the undisputed ruler of the continent, was known for his cruelty. Rumors whispered that he took lovers only to discard them when they failed to please him, or worse, that he was looking for something he could never find. When we arrived, the citadel was not the chaotic dungeon I remembered from my past life's intelligence reports. It was silent, oppressive. The architecture was cold, sharp, and black, but impeccably maintained. We were lined up in the great hall. The air pressure dropped, making my new, weaker lungs struggle for oxygen. Then he entered. Malachur hadn't aged, but he had changed. The wild, fiery arrogance of the rival I knew was gone, replaced by a cold, hollow stillness. He wore robes of midnight silk embroidered with silver thread, the color of mourning in my old empire. He walked past the line of trembling beauties, his golden eyes scanning them with utter indifference. He stopped in front of me. My heart hammered against my ribs, not out of fear, but out of a reflexive, muscle memory instinct to summon a sword I no longer possessed. I glared at him. For a second, I forgot I was Julian. I looked at him with the defiant hatred of Selim. Malachur froze. His hand shot out, gripping my chin. His fingers were bruising. He tilted my head, studying my eyes. For the first time, a crack appeared in his icy mask. "What is your name?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "Julian," I spat out, my voice lacking the gravel of Selim's, but carrying his cadence. Malachur stared for a long moment, searching for something. Then, a dark, twisted smile touched his lips. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was the smile of a man who had found a drug to numb his pain. "Take the others to the servant quarters," he commanded his guards, never breaking eye contact with me. "This one, send him to the master suite." I was not chosen because I was beautiful. I was chosen because, by some cruel twist of fate, Julian bore a passing resemblance to Selim. I had become the replacement for myself. Life in the master suite was a psychological torture I hadn't anticipated. I wasn't a prisoner in the traditional sense. I was a doll. I was dressed in silks that were hauntingly familiar, tunics with high collars, the kind Selim used to wear to hide battle scars. My hair, which was lighter than Selim's, was dyed to match the shade of the fallen marshal. Malachur didn't touch me. Not at first. He would sit in a high-backed chair by the fireplace, drinking dark wine, and just watch me. Read, he would command, pointing to a book on military strategy. Read it aloud. And I would read, trying to mask my natural inflection, trying to sound like Julian. But Malachar would frown, the glass in his hand cracking. No, lower your voice. Speak with authority. Like he did. It was maddening. He was sculpting me into a ghost. One evening, 3 weeks into my captivity, the tension snapped. Malachar had been drinking more than usual. The anniversary of Selim's death, my death, was approaching. He cornered me on the balcony overlooking the blackened city. The wind whipped at our clothes. Why do you look at me like that? Malachar murmured, stepping into my personal space. The scent of ozone and spiced wine clung to him. Every other tribute cowers. They weep. But you look at me as if you want to tear my throat out. Maybe I do, I replied, the mask slipping. Maybe I despise what you've become. A king of ashes mourning a ghost. Malachar's eyes flared. He grabbed my waist, pulling me flush against his hard body. The power difference was staggering. In this body, I was helpless against his physical strength. You know nothing of ghosts, he hissed, his face inches from mine. I mourn the only man who ever made me feel alive. I mourn the sun that I extinguished. You killed him, I reminded him, my voice trembling with a mix of old rage and new, confusing heat. I didn't want to. The roar tore from his throat, raw and agonizing. Malachar buried his face in the crook of my neck, his body shaking. I didn't want him to die. I wanted to conquer him. I wanted to make him mine. And now I have you. A pale imitation. A mockery. His lips brushed the sensitive skin below my ear, and a jolt of electricity arced through me. It shouldn't have felt good. He was my enemy. He was using me. But the grief in his voice resonated with the hollowness in my own chest. I had died thinking he hated me. To learn that his obsession ran this deep. It complicated everything. I am not him, I whispered, though the lie tasted like ash. Tonight, you are, Malachar groaned. He kissed me then, hungry and desperate. It was a kiss of possession, an attempt to consume the life out of me to fill the void within him. I should have pushed him away. Instead, my hands found their way into his hair, pulling him closer. For a moment, the lines between Julian and Selim, between rival and demon lord, blurred into pure, kinetic sensation. But when he pulled back, looking at my face with a dazed expression, he whispered, Selim. The name, my name, shattered the moment. I shoved him away. I am Julian, I shouted, the hurt surprisingly sharp. I wasn't just angry that he saw a ghost. I was angry that he couldn't see me, the soul behind the eyes, regardless of the name. Malachar's expression hardened instantly. The vulnerability vanished behind the demon lord's mask. Get out of my sight. The dynamic shifted after that night. Malachar became colder, yet more possessive. He dragged me to court meetings, forcing me to sit at his feet like a prize pet. It was during one of these meetings that I realized the empire was crumbling. The northern dukes were rebelling, sensing Malachar's instability. They were planning a coup. I listened to the generals propose idiocy after idiocy. They suggested a frontal assault on the Frost Pass, a suicide mission. My tactical mind, honed by decades of war, screamed in protest. That will fail, I said loudly. The room went silent. The generals stared at the concubine, speaking out of turn. Malachar turned slowly on his throne, his eyebrow arched. Oh, Malachar asked, his voice dangerously soft. And what does a pleasure boy know of war? The Frost Pass is susceptible to avalanches, I said, standing up. I walked to the map, ignoring the gasps of the court. I traced the line of the mountains. If you send the heavy cavalry here, the vibration alone will bury them. You need to send a strike team through the Shadow Ravine. Flank them. Cut off their supply line. It was a classic Selim strategy. Aggressive, risky, but brilliant. Malachar stared at the map, then at me. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Leave us, Malachar commanded. The generals scrambled out, leaving us alone in the vast throne room. Malachar descended the steps, his gaze intense. Who taught you that? That is not knowledge a minor noble's bastard would possess. I read it. I lied quickly. In your library. My library contains history, Malachar said, stalking closer. It does not contain the unpublished strategies of the late Grand Marshal Selim. He trapped me against the map table. Who are you, Julian? I am the man trying to save your empire. I deflected. Why, he countered. You should hate me. You should want me to fall. Because, I said, looking him in the eye, if you fall, the chaos will kill thousands. I may be a tribute, but I am not a monster. Malachur studied me, his suspicion warring with a desperate hope he refused to acknowledge. You sound so much like him. It's cruel. Perhaps, I said softly. He wasn't the only one who understood you. For a week, Malachur implemented the strategy. It worked flawlessly. The rebellion was crushed. But the victory brought no relief. Malachur grew more erratic. He began spending hours in the forbidden wing of the castle, the wing where the dark sorcery was practiced. Curiosity, my fatal flaw, drove me to investigate. I slipped past the guards using a stealth cant, a small spell I shouldn't have been able to use in this body, but my soul remembered the weave of magic even if my core was weak. I found Malachur in a circular chamber lit by blood-red candles. In the center of the room lay a sarcophagus of crystal, and inside it was my old body, Selim, preserved perfectly in stasis. I stifled a gasp, hand over my mouth. Seeing one's own corpse is a trauma no amount of mental fortitude can prepare you for. The wound in the back was gone, healed by whatever dark magic Malachur was pouring into it. Malachur was kneeling beside the coffin, his hand resting on the cold crystal. I'm close, he whispered to the corpse. The vessel is almost ready. Julian. His soul resonance is compatible. I just need to hollow him out. Once the vessel is empty, I can pull you back from the void, Selim. The blood froze in my veins. He didn't love Julian. He didn't even see Julian as a person. I was a battery, a spare part. He was fattening me up, synchronizing my energy with his, solely to rip my soul out and shove Selim's soul, my soul, back into this new vessel? Or worse, was he trying to force my soul back into the old corpse using Julian's life force as the catalyst? It didn't matter. The ritual required a sacrifice. Me. I backed away, terrified. But I tripped. A vase shattered. Malachur spun around, his eyes glowing with demonic energy. You. I scrambled back, but he was there in an instant, pinning me to the wall. How much did you hear? He growled. Enough to know you're insane. I shouted. You can't bring the dead back, Malachur. You'll only summon a monster. I will do anything to have him back. Malachur roared, the shadows in the room swirling like a tempest. You are nothing. You are a container. Be grateful you serve a purpose. I am Selim. The scream tore out of my throat before I could stop it. The silence that followed was absolute. The shadows froze. Malachur's grip on my shoulders slackened. He stared at me, his face twisting in confusion and rage. What did you say? I am Selim. I sobbed, the truth finally breaking the dam. You idiot. You blind, arrogant fool. I didn't go to the void. I came here. I've been here the whole time. Malachur laughed. It was a dry, broken sound. Lies. You are a desperate tribute trying to save his skin. The scar on your left shoulder, I said rapidly, desperate to prove it. You got it from a wyvern in the Ashlands. You didn't tell anyone because you were ashamed you let your guard down. The night before our final battle, you sent a messenger. You offered a truce. A marriage alliance. I rejected it because I thought it was a trap. But it wasn't, was it? You wanted to stop the fighting. Malachur stumbled back as if struck physically. His face went pale. No one knew about the alliance offer. I burned the scroll. I read it, I whispered. I read it, and I burned it too. Because I was afraid. I was afraid that if I stopped fighting you, I would have to admit that you what? Malachur's voice was barely audible. That I admired you. I confessed. That the only time I felt real was when your blade was against mine. Malachur looked from me to the corpse in the coffin, then back to me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The horror of what he had almost done, sacrificed the very soul he was trying to save, crushed him. He fell to his knees. The great demon lord, the tyrant of the obsidian citadel, covered his face with his hands and wept. It was a pitiful sight. And yet I moved. I walked over to him. I should have run. I should have stabbed him while he was distracted. But I knelt before him. I touched his hair. Malachur. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I almost destroyed you. But you didn't, I said. He reached out, his hand trembling as it touched my cheek. This new, softer cheek. Is it really you? I'm different, I said. This body is weak. I can't wield a sword like I used to. I'm not the Grand Marshal anymore. I don't care, Malachar swore, pulling me into a desperate embrace. I don't care if you are a beggar, a tribute, or a ghost. If you are here, that is all that matters. He kissed me then, and it was different. It wasn't the hungry consumption of a man mourning the dead. It was a worshipful, terrified reverence. It was the kiss of a man holding a miracle he knew he didn't deserve. That should have been the happy ending. But we are not characters in a fairy tale. We are soldiers in a war story. The ritual circle Malachar had prepared had been active. The dark mana had been gathering, waiting for a catalyst. And when Malachar's emotional control shattered, the energy lashed out. The shadows in the room coalesced. A construct, a mindless beast formed from the necrotic energy Malachar had gathered, rose from the circle. It shrieked, a sound of pure malice. Malachar was still on his knees, drained by the emotional shock. The beast lunged for him. Move, I shouted. I didn't have my holy sword. I didn't have my divine armor. But I had the muscle memory of a lifetime of war. And I had the knife I had stolen from the dinner table earlier that night. I shoved Malachar aside and drove the knife into the beast's eye. It was like stabbing concrete. The force threw me backward. I slammed into the wall, ribs cracking. The beast turned its gaze on me. It raised a claw made of shadow. No, Malachar screamed. The air in the room grew heavy. Gravity seemed to double. Malachar stood up, and for the first time in 3 years, the true demon lord emerged. Not the grieving widower, but the calamity. Darkness exploded from him. It didn't just engulf the beast, it erased it. He tore the construct apart atom by atom with a wave of his hand, his rage absolute. When the dust settled, he was at my side instantly. Julian, Selim, stay with me, he pleaded, his hands glowing with healing magic. I'm fine, I coughed, tasting blood. Just a few broken ribs. This body is so fragile. I will protect it, Malachar vowed, his forehead resting against mine. I will burn the world to ash before I let anything scratch you again. I looked at him, my rival, my killer, my lover. You don't need to burn the world, Malachar. You just need to rule it properly. With me, the transition wasn't easy. The court was confused when the demon lord proclaimed his tribute to be his consort and co-ruler. They were even more confused when the fragile-looking boy began correcting the generals on their supply lines and outmaneuvering the diplomats with a smile that was far too sharp. Rumors spread that the spirit of the late Grand Marshal haunted the palace. They weren't entirely wrong. Tonight, however, the politics are far away. We are in the royal chambers. The knife I held earlier, the one I used to defend him, is now on the bedside table. Malachar is hovering over me, his hands pinning my wrists to the silk sheets. There is no grief in his eyes anymore. Only a predatory heat that makes my breath hitch. You hesitated, he says softly, referencing the moment before the beast attacked, or perhaps the moment I held the knife to his throat at the start of all this. I wanted to hear you beg. I tease, my heart racing. I am done begging. Malachar growls, leaning down to bite the sensitive spot where my neck meets my shoulder. Now, I take what is mine. I arch into his touch, the last vestiges of Selim the Marshal melting away, leaving only the man who has finally found his equal in the darkness. We were enemies who tried to kill each other. Now, we are partners who would kill for each other. And as his hands explore this new body, claiming every inch of skin, I realized that reincarnation wasn't a curse. It was a second chance. A chance to see what happens when the fire meets the shadow and they don't destroy each other. They fuse. Malachar pulls back, his golden eyes burning. Say it. Say you're mine. I smile, wrapping my legs around his waist, pulling him down into the abyss with me. I am yours, Demon Lord, just as you are mine. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Selim reclaim his power from the shadows, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who tried to kill you? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,